Hello, my beautiful people. Today I will be talking about scales and scale patterns. My name is Rose Brown. So let's start with the first slide. So what are scales? A scale is simply a set of pitches notated in a certain order. Now there are millions of scales out there and so many to choose from and so different funky ways of thinking about it, but this is the most simplest definition to have. Now, these scales can be classified in different groups by whichever their intervals and the number of pitches within the scale, which we will talk about that later. Now, the new vocabulary terms on this slide is pitches, which is the quality of sound to identify if it is low or high, and intervals, which is the distance between two pitches. Now, the next slide is an example. As you can see, we have a middle C on the right side, and we have a high C on the left side. So if I was to sing these, I would go, and you can classify that by your ears, kind of the difference of the pitch, whether it's low or high. Now, if you were talking about the distance between those two pitches, you would call it an octave, or 8 notes apart. So let's continue to the next slide, and we're going to talk about major scales. A major scale is 2 tetrachords connected by a whole step. Now the scale degrees of the major scale is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 1. Which, as you can see, there's no flats or sharps, so nothing crazy. You are not messing with the scale. You are only following the rules that are set by its key signature. The new vocabulary terms we have here is tetrachord, which is 4 notes connected by a whole step, and then a half step. And scale degree, which is a scale relative to the tonic. And then tonic, which is the tonal center of the scale. So when I'm talking about tonic, it is the do. It is that one that you see in the scale degrees. So for example, when we're talking about the intervals, on the next slide you can see a piano that is set with the scale written on it. And so between C and D, you see that whole step. Then between D and E, there's another whole step. Between E and F, there's a half step because there is no semitone or there is no black bar in between E and F. Then between F and G, you have a whole step. Then between G and A, you have another whole step. Between A and B, you have a whole step. And then finally, between B and C, you have a half step. Again, because no semitone, no black bar in between. If you look over here, you see it notated out on a staff. And as you can see, it's following this key signature. So since there's no sharps or naturals, you aren't going to be messing with it any. Moving on, we're talking about minor scales now, which minor scales are simply scales that form a minor triad. That is the only rule that it has to follow in order to be classified as a minor scale. They have this dark, eerie feeling, very funky. Now there are 3 different types of minor scales. You have a natural minor, a harmonic minor, and a melodic minor. So for a natural minor, which is kind of our basic OG minor scale, you just have a flat third, a flat 6, and a flat 7. And no matter what minor scale you're thinking of, you always want to be thinking about the original and how you're going to temper it, because that's what we're doing with the harmonic and melodic scale. Because as you can see in the harmonic scale, the way you're changing it is that you are raising the 7 pitch. And in the melodic scale, what you can see is while you're ascending or going up, you're raising the pitch by a half step with the 6th and the 7th. And when you're going back down, you're just following the natural minor scale again. So it's going to be actually flat 7 and flat 6 going the descending way or back down. If you want to see how the intervals look like, you can see that in the next slide with our new vocabulary word, which is a triad, and you can see that on the left side. It is the snowman that you're creating, so it's your 1st, your 3rd, and your 5th. So if you think C, D, E, that's a 3rd. If you think C, D, E, F, G, that is a 5th, and that's how you create a triad. Now the natural minor scale, if you're looking right here, you can see how it's an E flat, a flat, and then a B flat. Between the C and D, you have a whole step. Between the D and the E flat, you have a whole step. Between the E flat and the F, you have a whole step. Between the F and G, you have a whole step. Between the G and the A flat, you have a half step. Between the A flat and the B flat, you have a whole step. And finally, between the B flat and the C, you have a whole step. For harmonic minor, however, as you can see, the biggest difference is instead of the B flat that was in the 7th scale degree of the natural minor, you have a B natural this time. Now in the natural minor, or melodic minor, what is happening here is that you have a B natural and a natural going up, but going back down, it returns. Moving on to our next slide, now we are utilizing scales using different amount of pitches. As we saw in the second slide when we were talking about how classifying a scale, we either classify by its quantity or by how you're changing each scale degree. As you can see, it can be changed by its quantity. So our first one is chromatic, which is 12 notes per octave. This is separated each by a semitone, which we will talk about in a minute. That is our new vocabulary term. Next, we're going to be talking about octatonic, which is 8 notes within an octave. And I know what you're thinking. Wait a minute. Major scale has 8 notes, and minor scales have 8 notes too. Are those octatonic? No, because that is now notated by a different quality, which is whole half, whole half, whole half, whole half. Those are the intervals between each note. Now for the pentatonic, there are 5 notes within the octave. You are not changing it any. What you're doing is you're having F1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. And we will see an example about that in a minute. Now, reviewing our new vocabulary term, which is a semitone. A semitone is what we refer to as the smallest interval or a half step. So, for example, C to C sharp, that is what we call a semitone. Our next slide, which is the examples, as you can see with the chromatic scale, which has 12 notes within the octave, you see a C, C sharp, D, D sharp, E, F, F sharp, G, G sharp, A sharp, B, and C. And each one of those, again, is separated by a half step. Moving on within the octatonic scale, as you can see, it's 8 notes within the octave, again, but this time it's separated by a whole step and then a half step. For example, the first 3 notes, C to D, that is a whole step, and then D to E flat, or D to D sharp, if you're thinking about enharmonics, that is a half step. Finally, when we're looking about the pentatonic scale, it is C, D, E, G, A, and C. So C to E, 1, 2, 3, E to G, that is jumping from the 3rd to the 5th, so 1, 2, 3, 5, 5, 6, and then 6 to the 8, or the 1, tonic. Our final slide summarizes everything up and reviews our vocabulary terms, which the summary is: a scale is simply a set of pitches in an organized order. Way different ways to go with this. You have major bright sounding ones, you have minor spooking sounding ones. It goes all over the place. Scales are classified and grouped by the amount of intervals that is in the room between each note or pitch and the number of pitches that you're going to have within the scale. For example, chromatic has 12 notes within the scale, and for example, it is separated by a whole then half. Vocabulary terms, we have pitches, intervals, tetrachord, scale degree, tonic, triad, and semitone. Thank you all, and y'all have a beautiful day.